Am I really gonna go through with this? Guess I'll find out. Death Battle is a show that really does mean a lot to me, as I've been watching it ever since the first Mario vs Sonic. Now, I was already a huge fan of crossover fan animations, watching a lot of them growing up. But Death Battle is what introduced me to the versus element of crossover animations, which paved the way to showing me many other versus shows like Fictional Characters Collide, Fan War, Cartoon Fight Club, etc. Seeing all these shows hire different animators and even seeing some animators grow from the very beginning is what inspired me to go through to becoming a sprite animator myself. Joining the versus community also helped me meet a lot of great people, many of which I'm still friends with to this day. They've helped introduce me to many new series I probably never would have checked out on my own, and even helped me out of my shell to start showing my voice to make videos like this one to begin with. So yeah, while this show may have its low points, this is definitely a show I hold near and dear to me. As of making this video, Death Battle has entered the 10th season, which they've gassed up as being one of the best seasons yet, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what they have in store for us. So far, some of my favorite Death Battles they've done are Robocop vs the Terminator, Iron Man vs Lex Luthor, Kirby vs Majin Buu, the Mega Man Battle Royale, Ma vs Tatsumaki, Steven Universe vs Star Butterfly, Saitama vs Popeye, and more recently, Trunks vs Silver and SpongeBob vs Aquaman. But despite having over 10 years worth of Death Battle matchups done, there are still plenty of different fights and characters I would love to see them cover. So I'm going to go over my top 10 most wanted Death Battle matches. Now keep in mind this is all my opinion, and my opinion may be different from your opinion. So don't be too surprised if my list is different from yours. People want different things in a matchup, whether it be connections, fight potential, fairness, or even just personal bias of characters, and that's perfectly alright. Not everyone wants the same thing, so don't try and convince me that I'm an idiot for liking what I like. Also, I'm well aware that there's a chance that some of these fights will probably never happen, either because the characters I want Death Battles to use may have more popular and more requested matches, or the characters I want may be outside the field of view. Doesn't stop me from wanting them. Oh, and I guess I'll try to make a quick little prediction of who I think wins each match, but probably best to take my words with a grain of salt, as I'm not really that much of a versus debater. I can't really calc or do things like that. So with all that out of the way, let's go over my top 10 most wanted Death Battles. Kirby vs Wimera Tempest from Reincarnated as a Slime. Both are tiny, round, and godlike beings that are among the strongest of their worlds, with the ability to consume their enemies and take them to the infinite void that is their stomachs, while also gaining the previous abilities of what they consumed, with Wimera gaining their powers and even being able to transform into whatever monster they absorbed, and Kirby gaining access to his copy abilities. This is basically just Kirby vs anime Kirby, if that makes sense. The main draw of this fight for me is just the chance to see Wimera covered on the show. Reincarnated as a Slime is one of my favorite animes ever. It's beautifully animated, has a lot of likable characters, and does a great job with its world building. I highly recommend it. And I think it would also be neat to see a more up-to-date analysis on Kirby, given he's been a part of a lot more games since Kirby vs Buu, and I think Wimera would be the perfect choice for his next opponent in my opinion. I think at the moment, Kirby's most popular opponent is Mario, which could be fun, but I think I'd rather Kirby come back to fight someone else, given we've already had Mario twice already. And the majority of Wimera's other matches are either other ISEKAI characters like Ans or Kumoko, which I have next to no experience with, or just other OP characters like Xeno Goku or Archie Sonic, which just the connection of overpowered isn't enough to interest me. Sure, Reincarnated as a Slime may not be up there in popularity as some other animes like Dragon Ball or Naruto, but it's still very popular in its own right. I mean, it's popular enough to have its own movie that's been released in theaters, so that's gotta account for something. Even then, I'm pretty sure Kirby would be more than iconic enough to carry the episode and make it do well anyways. I just think there's a lot you could do with a fight like this. It'd be fun to see this go from a basic fight between two harmless looking blobs into a fight that becomes extremely destructive and cosmic as it escalates. Pretty sure the main stick of this fight will be mostly having them go back and forth with their abilities and powers, only to end up devouring each other's attacks and evolve as the battle continues, with Wimera using Gluttony to absorb any projectiles Kirby throws at them and adding them to their arsenal, and Kirby accessing their various copy abilities by sucking up Wimera's attacks. There are a lot of copy abilities I'd love to see them include, like the various Ultra abilities from Return to Dreamland or the weird combination abilities from Crystal Shards, like that double lightsaber or maybe even Fridge Kirby. I don't know if they'd be able to include any mouthful modes from Forgotten Land, given this would probably take place in Wumuu's world, which isn't as advanced technologically speaking as our world. But it'd be cool if they'd be able to somehow work that in. I know for sure you definitely need to have a sword fight between Sword Kirby and Wumuu. Maybe even have both engulf their blades with fire to add a bit more flair to it. Speaking of fire, I would actually like to see Kirby turn into Fire Kirby and try to spew fire at Wumuu, only for Wumuu to just completely no-sell it and walk right through it to show off their fire resistance. This even has the potential to become a small team battle, since both Kirby and Wumuu have been seen to be able to create clones of themselves on command. On the Wumuu side of things, I would like it if they played into Wumuu being a tactician in this fight, maybe with them interacting and strategizing with the Great Sage, which is basically Wumuu's version of Java as a fighter. They could have some funny interactions like they do in the show. Going back to tactics, maybe you can have Wumuu distract Kirby by summoning up a glob of honey and feeding it to him like he did against Maleem, and while Kirby is distracted eating, Wumuu uses that opening to their advantage. Ooh, also, one more scene I would love to see them include is having Wumuu transform into a large Pac-Man to try and chomp on Kirby, since there was once a crossover event between Pac-Man and the Slime ISEKAI Memories game, where Wumuu actually fights the Pac-Man ghost and eventually gains the ability to turn into Pac-Man. This could be a neat little callback to the old days where Pac-Man vs Kirby was the big matchup for the both of them. Also, I just think Pac-Man is neat, but I'll talk more about that later. In terms of animation style, it'd probably be best to keep this as a sprite fight, considering both would be constantly transforming into different forms, and I'd imagine that'd be a lot of 3D models to make. They have already shown before that they can do a great job animating Kirby with sprites when he fought against Boo, and Wumuu has some really good sprites that they can use from Grand Summoners, which they've shown to be capable of using and wigging with Ryoko, so they should be able to with Wumuu as well, assuming they just don't make their own sprites like they normally do. Pretty sure it's only thematic that this battle ends with the loser getting eaten. Maybe with Kirby turning into Cook Kirby and turning Wumuu into his next dish and eating them up. Fitting, given that slimes are actually a delicacy in the Central world. And if Wumuu wins, it'd be cool if they ended with Kirby trying to launch one final attack, only to have it get absorbed by Wumuu's Beelzebub along with Kirby himself. Who do I think will be the one served on the silver platter? Well, I'm sure a lot of people are probably expecting Kirby to win, given how associated they are with being overpowered. Heck, even people who've only seen the slime anime might assume the same. But you'd be surprised, in the Reincarnated as a Slime with light novel, Wumuu is freaking broken. Let's just say there was a reason people put them up against Archie Sonic and Xenogoku. Now, please keep in mind, I'm not fully familiar with the light novel, so I wouldn't be surprised if I'm missing some context with some of the things here, so apologies if I fumble anything. In the novels, Wumuu can reach multiversal levels of power, with Turn Null, which gives them the power to recreate the world, which contains parallel universes tens of thousands of times over. They could also fight against and tank attacks from Yuki, who had enough power to end the entire world. This is way more powerful than anything I heard for Kirby. Definitely doesn't help that Wumuu can just regenerate from any and all types of damage they take, as well as just having resistances and nullifications to things like elemental attacks, spiritual attacks, poison, and mental attacks, which really limits Kirby's options for putting Wumuu down. Even trapping Wumuu in Kirby's pocket dimension isn't a reliable method, given that Wumuu can teleport and travel through space and time. Now, Kirby does seem to be faster than Wumuu, at least from what I've seen, and does have some hackers that could likely do Wumuu in, like again using his cooking copy ability to turn Wumuu into food, but Wumuu definitely isn't lacking in hacks themselves, given they could paralyze and knock Kirby out with paralyzed breath, using poisonous breath to turn Kirby into sludge, or again just absorbing Kirby with Beelzebub like they did against Clayman. Plus, given the fact that Wumuu is just a way more skilled fighter as well as being a skilled tactician, I could eventually see them being able to tag Kirby and land a finishing blow. Definitely helps that Wumuu could just straight up slow down and freeze time to bypass Kirby's speed advantage. Sorry Kirby, but I gotta give this one to the slime themselves. Tsuyu Azui from My Hero Academia vs Kermit the Frog from the Muppets. Two iconic frog-based characters who are known for being kind-hearted and heroic. Alright, so maybe not the most thematic of death battles connection-wise, but I really don't think you need a novel's worth of connections to make this fight work. It'd be cool to see these two covered on Death Battle. Tsuyu is a contender for one of my favorite characters in My Hero, right after Todoroki, who was already covered on the show. So she would definitely be my personal pick for the next My Hero rep. And I know I would lose my mind if they announced the Muppets would appear on Death Battle. Can you imagine them going over the feats and abilities of literal puppets of all things? That'd be hilarious. especially if they were to pair them up against an anime character like Tsuyu, which would definitely add a good shock value to the reveal, similar to something like Saitama Popeye. Luckily, it seems like they're pretty open to the idea of Muppets on the show, given they actually did Tsuyu vs. Comet as a death battle cast, along with even stranger matches like Miss Piggy vs. Jackie Chun. So who better to come represent the Muppets than the main frog himself? I think this fight can work well in any animation style, whether it be hand-drawn, sprites, or maybe even 3D. Tsuyu does have a pretty good 3D model from My Heroes 1's Justice, and Lord knows there are plenty of 3D models of Comet to choose from. Speaking of 3D, I wouldn't be surprised to see Devil Artemis working on this fight, considering his connection with Comet, and I of course wouldn't mind seeing him on. He's working on some of my favorite animations of the show after all. Though, that being said, I respectfully asked for Cell to not appear in the episode at all. Don't get me wrong, I personally enjoy Artemis' Cell videos, but if the DBX showed me anything, it's that Devil Artemis Cell co-hosting on a Versus show just doesn't work. Not to mention the fact that for people who haven't seen Devil Artemis stuff before, it'd be way too confusing to see Perfect Cell co-host with Wiz and Boomstick in this episode of all episodes. Also, please make sure Comet actually acts like how he canonically does, and not like the DA's version of him. Again, I don't mean any disrespect to Artemis, I love the guy and his content, but I want to keep the fight respectful to the source material. Going back to the fight at hand, I think a good way for the fight to start would be Floppy doing hero work and going on patrol, trying to locate the world's #1 criminal himself, Constantine. And during her lookout, she accidentally mistakes Comet as the thief and tries to take him in. But of course, Comet tries not to let that happen. And by the time Tsuyu realizes her mistake and tries to fix things, Comet could already be too angry to listen to anything she has to say.
You big dumb stupid rotten monster! You make me so mad I don't believe it! You are without a doubt one of the nastiest monsters I've ever seen! And I'm so mad I'm gonna tell all my friends how rotten you are, and nobody's gonna ever play with you anymore, nobody's gonna even talk to you anymore! That's how mad I am!
Oh, Froggy!
And furthermore, I'm gonna tell your mother on you!
Oh, not my
your
mommy!
Mother, and your mother's not gonna let you come here anymore!
Froggy, please, Froggy, not my mommy.
I'm gonna tell your mommy.
I'd imagine the dynamic of this fight would be Tsuyu trying to stay calm and collected as they try their best to calm Comet down. However, thanks to Comet's clumsiness and them freaking out, they end up accidentally cause things to escalate and get worse. Tsuyu will probably be focusing more on playing defensive, hopping circles around Comet and trying to close in on him, while Comet just throws out random cartoony bullcrap out of nowhere to fight Tsuyu, like his exploding paper airplanes, his bubble blaster, or maybe just straight up a gun to try to keep her at bay. Maybe you can even have him say,
I'd like to go on record as being opposed to the use of violence for purposes of conflict resolution. However...
and then he starts firing at Tsuyu. Eventually though, Tsuyu manages to close in on Comet, and Comet starts using a sword to fight her off, or maybe even his lightsaber. Both just have so many ways to play off each other. There can be a scene where they both turn invisible, with Tsuyu using their camouflage and Comet using the invisible duck spray, or perhaps you can have Comet use his shrink ray to shrink Tsuyu down, or just have Comet eat Professor Honeydew's Instagrow pills to become larger, and have Tsuyu battle and maneuver around a giant Comet. Definitely would like a scene that plays into their froggy characteristics and have them use their great jumping skill to hop around the arena they're fighting in. Maybe have the fight take place near a swamp or a lake to allow Tsuyu to swim around as well. And Comet can increase his mobility with his jump boost or just straight up fly like Peter Pan. Basically, I would love to see a lot of movement throughout the fight. Speaking of movement, it would be cool if they animated Comet to be more puppet-like throughout the fight. Basically just animating his arms wobbling all over the place, or having him make goofy and scrunched up faces, as well as just other generally awkward and funny looking movements. As for Tsuyu, I would definitely like her to have pretty straightforward dialogue like she does in My Hero, with her just being blunt that nothing about Comet's weapons make any sense, or maybe just being painfully honest and saying that Comet looks silly or cute anytime Comet attempts to be threatening. And of course, during the climax of the fight, I would want her to say some variation of the Plus Ultra speech, given it's a school's motto, and it would keep up the previous trend of the My Hero death battles ending that way. On the topic of the climax, I guess the hardest part of this fight would be trying to justify either of these two killing each other, given how kind they are. Maybe you could possibly have the fight escalate to the point where Comet decides to turn into Monster, which turns him into a more mindless, bloodlusted monster, and Tsuyu, possibly thinking that he turned into some sort of miniature Nomu, feels like she has no choice but to put him down. They could probably go down that route if they want to make it more believable. I don't know. If they can make someone like SpongeBob kill a man and have it actually feel in character, I trust that they can do the same with these two. Who do I think will win in this climax? Well, I did animate this fight myself once upon a time and had Tsuyu win, and I personally still stand by this outcome. Now I know there are a lot of naysayers out there who think that this is the easiest win of Komet's life, but those same people also like to use things like the non-canon Mirrorverse Komet, despite the mirror versions being stated to be a separate alternate universe version of the canon characters, or just stuff like Muppet Babies, which, while technically canon, literally all the adventures in Muppet Babies take place in their imagination. So I don't think it's viable at all for this debate. So sorry guys, we won't get the goated blowy image of Animal lifting up a star in the analysis, which is a freaking stage prop by the way. Besides, with all the non-canon cosmic stuff, I think this fight is genuinely close and could go either way. Komet is definitely faster than Tsuyu, given we see him being able to pilot spaceships to other planets and through asteroid fields, and can scale to other Muppets who can do the same, but Tsuyu definitely holds the strength and durability advantage. The best feat that Komet has is scaling to Stadler and Waldorf of all people, who beat up a group of monsters so hard they created a small mushroom cloud, which would probably put Komet at building level if I were to make a guess. This is good in its own right, but nothing compared to Tsuyu, who has a feat that makes it town level and can scale to characters on that level as well. This means that Komet will struggle to put a dent in Tsuyu, while Tsuyu will only need one good hit to end the fight. Granted, landing that one hit will be tricky thanks to Komet's speed, but given the fact that Tsuyu is just a way more skilled and tactical fighter, as well as Komet just being way more clumsy, I think Tsuyu will eventually land that one hit. Especially helps that Tsuyu could camouflage herself to make it easier to sneak up on Komet, or just coat her body with poisonous mucus that would paralyze Komet if he touches it too much, which would give Tsuyu the opening to finish him off. Now, like I said, I don't think it's impossible for Komet to win here. I wouldn't be surprised that there was probably something in the Muppets' long history that could get Komet a leg up. For example, I know Komet has the Midas touch, which he could potentially use to turn Tsuyu into gold, but it's clear that this isn't something that he always has on, given he isn't always turning things into gold. And this probably wouldn't be a go-to move for him to use either. Plus, he ends up turning himself into gold at the end of that story, so probably not the most reliable argument on its own. But if Komet were to have more stuff like that, I could definitely see him pulling it off. But for now, I think I'm siding with Tsuyu winning. Pepsi Man vs. Cool Spot. These two are both iconic soda mascots created in the late 1900s, with Pepsi Man of course being the mascot of Pepsi, and Cool Spot being the mascot of 7-Up. Both are known for acting as the cool guys, being the life of the party, and both even starred in their own video games. It's always fun to see characters like these that aren't meant to be taken seriously get discussed on the show, with things like Chuck vs. Segata, Smokey vs. McGruff, Kool-Aid Man vs. Macho Man, to even things like the serial mascot Royale Death Battle cast just being a joy to watch. So I would definitely like to see more mascots on the show, and I think these two would be great picks for each other. This fight would be a bit different than most other mascot fights, because unlike most mascots who could just randomly warp reality or can pull the sun around, Pepsi Man and Cool Spot are a bit more grounded in what they can do. So yeah, I definitely wouldn't expect this fight to end with them creating a constellation or anything like that, but don't worry, I can see this one still being a fun one. For starters, I think both of their personalities would play off perfectly with each other, with Pepsi Man being more clumsy and dim-witted, and the much smaller Cool Spot generally being mischievous and playful. I can actually see this fight playing out like a Tom and Jerry skit. I mean, the opening pretty much writes itself, with Pepsi Man trying to enjoy a nice bottle of Pepsi, only for all the flavoring and color to be drained or wiped away by a couple of Cool Spots. As a result, Pepsi Man gets angry and starts chasing them around trying to get his hands on them, only to start running into walls and falling on his face as the various Cool Spots just keep tripping him over and messing with him throughout the fight. Eventually though, the battle can start to escalate as more Cool Spots start showing up out of various 7-Up logos and start swarming Pepsi Man, forcing him to have to battle through hordes of Cool Spots. I can honestly see them somewhat recreating that one scene from Chuck vs. Segata, where Chuck gets ganged up on by multiple Segatas and eventually has to fight a giant Segata. Given that we actually see that the size of a Cool Spot can vary depending on the size of the 7-Up logo they pop out of, maybe we can have a couple of giant Cool Spots pop out of the side of a 7-Up truck, or maybe some sort of billboard, and have Pepsi Man fight them. I would really like a scene where Pepsi Man is just running throughout the city they're fighting in, trying to just outmaneuver and dodge all the oncoming Cool Spots as they try to throw random objects at him, dogpile him, or just spam their finger guns at him. Maybe even have a couple of Cool Spots start chasing him down with motorcycles as well. That way we can have part of the fight feel more like the Pepsi Man video game, with him running and dodging different types of obstacles. While I feel like Spider 3D will work just fine for this, I would probably prefer this fight to be hand-drawn, to follow the pattern of the last two mascot fights being hand-drawn as well. Sure, that would probably make this fight a bit shorter than most episodes, but I think it'll be fine, given again both aren't really as outrageous as most other mascots. so I don't see anyone wrongly accusing this fight of having missed potential like what they said with Kool-Aid Man Macho Man. As for the winner, I did do this fight myself a while ago and had Pepsi Man win, but that was mostly just because I preferred Pepsi Man and also wanted to sneak in an inside joke in the animation. I actually believe that Cool Spot would take this one. I don't think it's a complete stomp, however. I think Pepsi Man does hold an advantage in physical strength and has shown much greater durability than Cool Spot, not to mention he's just generally a more skilled hand-to-hand fighter given he actually guest starred in fighting Vipers at one time. So maybe with enough effort I could see him taking out a single Cool Spot, but that's the issue. Cool Spots aren't just one person, they're an entire species. Basically how it works is, with every 7-Up logo there is, whether it be on a vending machine or a can or anything like that, a Cool Spot can spawn from it. So if Pepsi Man wants to permanently put Cool Spot down, he would have to somehow shut down all production of 7-Up and then proceed to destroy every single 7-Up logo in the world. And call it a hunch, but I don't think Pepsi Man is going to be able to do all that before he just gets overwhelmed by all the Cool Spots. Definitely doesn't help that the Cool Spots are just much faster than Pepsi Man, given that we've seen them be able to dodge cannon fire, gunfire, and missiles before. Not only do they outmatch Pepsi Man in numbers, but also versatility as well, given Cool Spots can just pull out random objects out of nowhere like pogo sticks, vacuums, and even chainsaws. They even have access to dynamite capable of blowing up stone statues. Plus, they just have an easy time of keeping them at a distance as well with their finger guns, and these shots can damage and eventually defeat large robots and sea creatures. With all this firepower on their hands, I think they would eventually be able to chip through Pepsi Man's durability and take him out. Pepsi Man surprisingly doesn't have many abilities that be useful in a fight like this, despite what the memes want you to think. Even the weird Pepsi bending you probably see from some Pepsi Man animations just aren't real. He can only summon Pepsi cans and bottles and that's it. Unless you count that split-second Pepsi transition screen that plays whenever he summons Pepsi. So yeah, I'll definitely side with Cool Spot on this one.
Hey, thanks man, stay cool.
Mordecai and Rigby from Regular Show vs Finn and Jake from Adventure Time. The two classic duos from shows that premiered on Cartoon Network at similar times. Both of these duos are best friends who enjoy hanging out and playing video games, with the taller, blue, more responsible friend and the lazier, shorter friend. Both Regular Show and Adventure Time are very popular shows on Cartoon Network. Even nowadays, after the series have already ended, both of the shows are still being talked about, so I can definitely see this episode doing really well. This matchup has definitely gained a lot more popularity than ever before thanks to the Death Battle ballot that happened near the end of Season 9, where they were one of the choices for the 2D slot. So I'm hoping all the support over this match means we'll get it soon. It's actually been quite a while since we last had a good 2v2 on the show. Pretty sure the only 2v2 we had on the show was Jak and Daxter vs Ratchet and Clank, unless you count that one fight scene from Dante vs Bayonetta. Both of these fights were great, so I definitely would want to see more 2v2s, and I think this match is the best way to do it. Luckily, the Death Battle team seems to really like this match as seen when they did a Death Battle cast for it. And more importantly, in that same cast, they seem to be open to the idea to give both teams everything they have ever used from their shows, which is great because that makes this fight 1,000 times more fun, as we can see a lot of the weird one-off crap like Finn and Jake's Ice Ninja abilities, the Wizard powers, or the Ancient Psychic Tandem War Elephant. And for Mordecai and Rigby, we can have them gain access to the weird basketball powers, potentially the Baby Duck mechs, or the giant Lemon Chef arcade monster. Honestly, in true Regular Show fashion, I would love it if the fight just started with Mordecai and Rigby doing a seemingly normal task, only for things to go 0 to 100 really quickly. Maybe they could be playing an online fighting game with Finn and Jake, and they get sucked into the game and they end up fighting there. Oh, and you gotta have my boy Skips there before they get sucked in to say, "I've seen this before." Otherwise this episode would crash and burn, I promise you. I would imagine both duos would have much different ways of fighting in this episode, with Finn and Jake being more skilled and actually coordinated as a team, while Mordecai and Rigby are fighting by the seat of their pants and arguing with one another. We'd probably start with Mordecai and Rigby getting their butts handed to them by Finn and Jake's superior fighting skill, so they have no choice but to bust out their Deathcorn dough outfits in order to somewhat even the playing field. Maybe there can be a scene where Mordecai and Rigby use the power to try and turn Finn into an animate object, only for Finn to just tear through the transformation like he did when he got turned into a cat. Maybe Finn can use the Jake suit to fight Mordecai and Rigby, and they respond by fusing into that one Rancid form for maximum gaming power. I'd also like a scene where Finn eventually gets his robot arm broken, so he replaces it with that weird telekinetic arm he gets, and starts throwing a bunch of flying bricks at Mordecai and Rigby. And for the climax, after having Finn go through all his various swords, you can have him finally bust out the Night Sword to try and lock Mordecai and Rigby's powers away, as well as have Jake transform into his blue form he gets at the end of the series. And in response, Mordecai and Rigby can bust out the Fist of Justice to try and finish Finn and Jake off. It'd be funny if they could somehow manage to work in the "I think they want you to put the hood on him" interaction before the two duos enter the final showdown. As for who I think wins in this showdown, I have no idea. Literally every time I hear people talk about this matchup, the answer always changes. And of course that definitely makes me want this fight even more. It's not often when we get a fight as close as this one. Though if I had to make a quick guess, I guess I've always slightly leaned towards Mordecai and Rigby winning this one. From what I've seen and heard, both are roughly equal in terms of power and durability, both being around the planetary area. However, I rarely ever hear many good speed feats or adventure time that matches with what is seen in regular show, like that time Mordecai and Rigby flew into outer space and passed multiple planets with their basketball powers. So if anyone's gonna land a fatal blow first, I think it'd be these two. Plus, I just think that the power is the best thing either team has to use, given that they can just do just about anything, and can even shield against Antipops' blasts. I know some people like to bring up Jake's imagination as a potential counter to this, given we've seen him be able to summon things with his mind in that episode, but Mordecai and Rigby can do that too. We see this in both the Poet episode and the Dungeons and Dragons episode, that they can summon whatever they want out of thin air with their imagination as well. Plus, unlike Jake, who seems to struggle to control his imagination and can only summon things that are invisible and can actually backfire on their team, Mordecai and Rigby seem to have a better handle on using the power to do what they want. So I'll slightly edge it out to the slackers.
Oh, not setting up the chairs next time. Not setting up the chairs next time.
The Fall Guys The Fall Guys Bean versus the Imposter from Among Us. If you've been following the Death Battle Ballad arc that occurred during the end of Season 9, then you probably aren't too surprised to see this match show up on the list. I know at a first glance it seems like this match is just a random meme pick, and it kinda is. I just think that this will be a fun match to hear Death Battle talk about. I know both have some other popular matches like The Thing for the Imposter or Gang Beasts for the Fall Guys, but I just feel like Fall Guys vs Among Us is the legacy fight they should go for, both being the bean-shaped games that blew up in popularity in 2020. I've talked about this match a couple of times with some friends and it's really fun, so it'll be fun to hear this match discussed by Death Battle. I mean, can you imagine hearing Wiz and Boomstick talk about freaking Fall Guys and Among Us? I think it'd be fun if they included absolutely everything for both, with of course including the main games, but also including all the commercials and shorts for Fall Guys, as well as all the stranger pieces of lore from the Fall Guys Twitter account. Surprisingly, there is actually just lore that exists within the various animated shorts, with actual characters like Pink, Clovis, Silent, or Banana. Maybe you can bring up the time that Fall Guys funded a park bench. I need more people to know about this. And for Among Us, you can include all the animated shorts and crossovers they've been in like Skatebird, Tinkertown, or Samurai Gun, and even the Among Us manga, which yes, is actually a real thing. You definitely can't tell me that this episode wouldn't do well. I'm pretty sure the memes alone would carry this episode in terms of views. Besides, people were genuinely excited for the new season of Fall Guys, and Among Us still has a pretty active player base, so I don't see these games dying anytime soon. I'm pretty sure Among Us has left too big of a scar on our minds for us to forget about it, that's for sure. But I think this fight can be more than just hearing Boomstick say Among Us. I think there was plenty of potential for a good fight between the two of them. I know there are a lot of naysayers who believe I have done all you could do with my little preview, and honestly, I feel sorry for the lack of imagination. Given that they both have very simple designs, I think any animation style could work for these two. Sprite, hand-drawn, 3D, maybe even live action if they're daring enough. Though I guess if I had to choose, I'd like it to be either hand-drawn or sprite, since I typically enjoy those types of animations the most, and it could allow them to make these two feel more cartoonish. I know for sure that they could probably use the sprites from Flame Makers as a base for the Imposter if those ever got public. They look good. I think throughout the start of the fight, it'd be funny to see the Fall Guy acting more cowardly, with him focusing more on running away and trying to stay alive, as opposed to fighting back and trying to win while the Imposter chases him around trying to kill him. To add on to this, you can have the fight take place on one of the Fall Guy's obstacle courses, so as the chase is going on, they're busy dodging and getting smacked around by all the various fans and hammers throughout the course. But maybe as the fight goes on, the Fall Guys become more motivated when he notices the crown at stake, since all the Fall Guys are obsessed with winning crowns, to the point where it was even confirmed in an old interview that they'd be willing to tear a human in half if they stood between them and a crown. I would love for that to be the killing blow if the Fall Guy wins, just him picking up the Imposter and just going full on Juggernaut at the end. Or if they want, they could always go with Liam's idea.
Look, they have arms, right? Like,
Yeah.
If the imposter wins, you could probably have a gory death with the imposter impaling the fall guy with a sharp alien tongue and biting its head off. That'd be a neat kill. Speaking of, I think it'd be cool if they play into the imposter being an alien shapeshifter. Like, at the start of the fight, it can start off in its normal crewmate's disguise, but as it goes more and more frustrated, it starts revealing its true form and becomes a grotesque monster like they have in the hide and seek mode. Perhaps you can have them changing into multiple different forms like some of the weird forms posted on the Among Us Twitter account, like the spider or a slug. I know an interaction I would love for them to have is to have the imposter shapeshift into a copy of the fall guy, and when the two charge towards each other, it anticlimactically cuts to them both of them just running towards each other awkwardly and just grabbing and pushing against each other like you do in Fall Guys. That'd be hilarious. Oh, you could also have them shapeshift into the Among Us horse for the climactic final showdown with the long guy. It's the only way this battle can end. Now, a big thing I hear people bring up against this idea is the fact that the Fall Guys have nothing they can fight with, only being able to grab and jump, but there's actually plenty of stuff they can bring to the table. You can have them throw on these blast balls, which are basically just bombs that can blast people away, and in this ad, we see that the blast ball can also fire a laser that just burns through whatever it's in its path. Maybe we can have them have a beam struggle between this and the cybernetic costume that the imposter has. Not to mention the fact that they teased potential power-ups for Fall Guys, as well as hammer weapons and fans, giving the Fall Guys more things to fight with. Another interaction you can have is the Fall Guy turning invisible like they did in the Halloween event, and the imposter uses their enhanced senses like they have in the hide and seek mode to find them. The Fall Guys could also come riding in on one of the robot rhinos to try and ram into the imposter, but the imposter manages to sabotage the rhino and cause it to turn against the Fall Guy. It'd be neat if they could use some of the various costumes to combat the imposter. Of course, I don't agree with scaling whatever costume they're wearing to canon characters like Sonic, but they do actually have costumes that are functional. Like, you can have the Fall Guy fly around in his pigeon costume as the imposter tries to shoot them down with their gun. The Fall Guy also has access to the Shovel Knight's shovel blade, which they can use the shovel drop with, and even has access to He-Man's power sword, which they can use to summon lightning out of the sky. I'm really tired of people saying that the Fall Guys bring nothing to the table in terms of animation potential or debate. Heck, not only is this match debatable, I would go as far as to say the Fall Guy just straight up kicks the imposter's ass. Both do definitely have some good advantages against one another. The imposter is definitely the more skilled fighter and is far more bloodthirsty than the Fall Guy, especially with games like Samurai Gun. The imposter is also smarter given they're typically portrayed as skilled manipulators who can trick other crewmates and even hack reactors and O2s in their spaceships. However, the Fall Guy clearly just physically dominates the imposter, though I guess that's pretty obvious considering the size difference. The Fall Guys are shown to be capable of effortlessly breaking through walls, crushing a car, and even lifting and bouncing around giant golden eggs with ease, which is way stronger than anything we've seen the imposter do, meaning that if the Fall Guy gets their hands on the imposter, they can end the fight right then and there. And more importantly, the Fall Guys are just way too durable for the imposter to do any real damage against. They've been able to survive getting launched far distances, being smacked around by hammers and large fruits, as well as surviving getting hit by axes and spikes. So those knives are basically useless. They fell into lava and were completely fine, surviving in the vacuum of space, and even survived getting sucked into a black hole. I just don't see any real way the imposter can put down the Fall Guy. Literally, the main stick of blowing up heads is useless here, given that we've seen the being survive without a head before, unlike the people in Among Us who are a bunch of wimps who get killed when they're decapitated. Now, the imposter is faster than the Fall Guy, so it would take some time before the Fall Guy can get a good hit in, but I don't think the speed gap is wide enough to where they can avoid the Fall Guy long enough to wear down their durability. People underestimate just how athletic the Fall Guys are, given we actually see them jump ridiculous distances and perform acrobatics. Plus, the Fall Guys just have way better mobility given that they can just fly with the aforementioned pigeon suit, a hoverboard, and potentially even just on their own, as well as having access to teleportation technology. So really, all the imposter can really do is delay the inevitable before the Fall Guy comes in and finishes them off for good. Oh, but what if the imposter comes back as a ghost and tries to mess with the Fall? Proton pack, suckers! And fully functional too. Plus, we see the Fall Guys can just actually just touch and pet Ghost, so they could probably just grab the imposter's ghost and strangle him again. I think the funniest thing about this match is the fact that I think it's the most likely one to happen out of this list, and it's completely my fault. And this isn't even me just being egotistical. The Death Battle team literally said themselves that they would never have been down for this fight if it wasn't for my fan-made preview that I did for this match. There aren't a lot of people that can say that they've single-handedly inspired an episode of Death Battle, so it would definitely be so cool to see this become a real episode. Obviously, I don't think it will happen this season because it lost the poll, but I generally think it's a good contender for season 11. Like I said before, I may have lost the battle, but I absolutely won the war. The Among Guys sweeper's wheel, and you can never escape it. The second coming from Animator vs Animation vs Henry Stickmin. These two are two of the most iconic stick figures on the internet. Both are known for breaking the fourth wall and being really meta, and both are seen crossing over and using other weapons from different series, with the second coming being a game hopper and Henry summoning other video game weapons out of nowhere. This match would be so cool to see happen on the show. It's rare to see Death Battle cover other web shows or indie games. Pretty sure the only indie game we've had on the show is Shovel Knight, and the only web shows we've seen covered on Death Battle are Ruby and Red vs Blue, which are both owned by Rooster Teeth. It'd be nice if Death Battle stepped a bit more out of their comfort zone to include indie stuff, and I think this would be a great way to start. I know most people would want to see them do the Stickman Battle Royale, which includes Red from Dick Figures and Fancy Pants, and don't get me wrong, if this is what Death Battle wanted to do, I'd be all for it. We don't get Battle Royales too often. But if we're talking realistically, I just think that Orange vs Henry would be the best course of action. From what I hear, the debate always comes down to these two anyways, and I feel like these two just have more connections beyond just stick figures. Plus, I'm just really biased towards these two series, with me watching a lot of Animator vs Animation and playing all the Henry Stickmin games growing up. While I've only seen Dick Figures once and don't remember much about it, and I've never played Fancy Pants. So this particular match will be the best case scenario for me. I can genuinely see this match doing well in terms of views too. Animator vs Animation is one of the most popular series on YouTube, and it's still going on to this day. Alan already started another season of AVA recently, so it's definitely relevant nowadays. And the Henry Stickmin collection is a very popular game series that's been going on for a while as well. Sure, it seems that the Death Battle team probably aren't too familiar with it when they talked about this match in the ballot banter, but hey, whenever they get around to researching Among Us, they're bound to look into Henry Stickmin at least a little bit. That's right, me making the Among Us preview was just an elaborate ploy to get the Death Battle team interested in Henry Stickmin, so we'll eventually see it on the show.
Exactly as planned.
In terms of animation style, it really only makes sense to do this match in hand-drawn, right? I mean, both are literally stick figures. Yeah, I know this typically results in a shorter fight, but given that they wouldn't have to worry about drawing a more complex design, like they usually do, I assume that would give them the chance to put most of their efforts and time into the fight itself. There's just so much you can do with a match like this. Both have just so many weapons and abilities they've gained through their adventures, especially Henry, who essentially just has hammer space and can use it to summon basically anything he wants. And Orange has plenty of stuff he can use, from his times in Mario, Pokemon, League of Legends, and especially Minecraft, since there's a whole spin-off series involving their adventures in Minecraft. I'd imagine the fight dynamic would just be Orange being more aggressive and rushing Henry and dominating with his superior fighting skill, so Henry has to keep pulling out random weapons in order to gain a temporary advantage. A funny visual gag you could do is having Henry pull out a mouse and menu to try and grab a new item, but before he gets the chance to make a selection, Orange rushes in and punches the mouse off screen. That'd be great. I'd imagine that Orange would mainly be using his Minecraft weapons to fight off Henry, with the occasional use of an item from Mario or League, but eventually, near the end of the fight, the second coming gets backed into a corner and transforms into his awakened state, which forces Henry to bring out his more powerful equipment, like his full body armor, his bionic enhancements, and even his spirit to even the playing field. There's so many cool interactions you can have in this fight. You can have Henry earthbend during the fight to try to keep Orange at a distance, but Orange ends up using his pickaxe to mine and break through all the rock he throws at him. You can have them both use a super mushroom to go giant, or even have them both clone themselves, with Orange messing with the game files, and Henry using his duplicate Orange to turn it into a small army battle. Oh, and of course there's no way you can have a Henry Stickmin episode without including the distraction dance.
Oh yeah, that's not.
And yes, I do find this funny. Maybe you can have Henry accidentally drop his corrupt tick on the ground, which ends up crashing the entire animation and has to reset back to its default animation software. Here you can have Orange grab the pencil tool and start drawing up various animals and helpers to start ganging up on Henry. Maybe Henry could try to counter this by using his own magic pencil to try and draw his own helpers, only to end up drawing a nutshot crawler and getting hit with friendly fire. There also has to be a scene with Henry's teleporter, because it wouldn't be Henry Stickmin without the teleporter messing things up. I'd like to imagine that Henry pulls out the teleporter in an act of desperation to try and escape Orange, but Orange accidentally hits the teleporter and causes it to malfunction, and it starts sending him all sorts of places. I imagine a scene similar to the roller coaster scene in Harley vs Jinx. In terms of a winner, I know at a first glance this should be a win for the second coming, given he's just portrayed as being way more competent and is a more skilled fighter than Henry, but I'm actually pretty sure Henry wins here. Henry just shows off way more impressive feats of strength and durability. like the time he charged up enough to one-shot an entire space station, or the time where he was able to knock an energy ball across the planet, and was even able to tank this explosion, which I believe was calculated to be mountain level. This is just way more than anything we've seen Orange pull off, even with his awakened mode. Plus, while Orange has been seen to be able to evade gunfire before, Henry's just known for moving around gunfire gracefully at this point. I mean, he once recreated the iconic Neo bullet dodging scene, but unlike Neo, who immediately got shot right after like an idiot, Henry straight up catches the bullet in his hand and throws it hard enough to break the gun in half. We've even seen him be able to just straight up block and deflect bullets easily, so I definitely would consider him to be the faster one here. Also, while his arsenal does have a shaky history, there's no denying that Henry just has way more things you can throw at Orange than vice versa, many of which could be game ending for Orange, like turning Orange into a leaf or using the top hat to possess him, or just saying "Wololo"
Narwini
to turn Orange over to his side. Though something worth noting is that both Henry and Orange have ways to come back from death. Henry has shown to have access to save files and has been shown to have full knowledge of all his fails. And the stick figures have been shown to be able to respawn after getting killed like you can in Minecraft, and has even been shown to be able to resist getting deleted before. So this definitely makes this tricky for both to kill one another. An argument you could possibly make for Orange is that they could possibly mess with the game files of the Henry Stickmin games in order to try and delete or corrupt his save files, given that we have seen him be able to mess with game files before, most notably in Animation vs League of Legends. However, I don't think this would work given that Henry has survived his game getting corrupted and was set twice before, and he's still able to have access to his previous save points. On the flip side, I think Henry actually does have some ways to get rid of Orange's respawn option. With his spirit reference, he's shown to be able to punch people into alternate timelines and change their previous history. Like when he punched the White Hand Man into a timeline where we never got his bionic enhancements. Perhaps he can punch Orange into a timeline where they never opened up Minecraft, thus getting rid of the respawn option. Or Henry could use his time machine to go back in time and stop Orange from getting drawn in the first place. Now you might think that Henry wouldn't be able to do this since he doesn't know where Orange was drawn, but the thing is, Henry was able to stop two soldiers that captured Ellie by using his time machine to go back in time to the exact moment where those two soldiers were enrolled into the military in order to get them kicked out, despite having never met these two before, so he'd likely be able to do something similar here. Either way, this match will definitely be an interesting one to see Death Battle figure out, and I hope we get to see it one day. Pac-Man vs Felix the Cat. These two are two of the oldest fictional characters of their respective genres, even predating more iconic characters like Mario or Donkey Kong in Pac-Man's case, and Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny in Felix's. Both helped pave the way for the video game and animation industry as a whole, creating a whole new era of entertainment, even getting reference and inspiring things in each other's genres. Now, I'm gonna be completely honest. Out of all the matches on this list, I feel like this is the one I see just not happening. This is mostly because the popular match for Pac-Man seems to be Luigi, and most people on the Death Battle team seem to be pretty down for this match. Now, don't get me wrong, I won't be upset if this match happens. I think the fight could be really fun, and I definitely want to see Pac-Man get on the show. He's one of my favorite characters, and he's definitely long overdue in my opinion, so I would honestly just be down for anybody to fight Pac-Man. I mean, how do you have a Death Battle with Dig Dug before Pac-Man? Plus, I do like Luigi, and I think he does deserve a one back, but I personally just don't think Pac-Man's his best match. I just personally find the connections of Pac-Man and Felix just more interesting than the ones with Luigi. Not to mention the fact that most people only really want Pac-Man versus Luigi just to give Luigi a W after people got mad that Luigi lost to Tails, and I feel like that's a bit disrespectful to Pac-Man. I know using more older characters like this may make it look like this episode wouldn't do well, but I think both are pretty iconic faces, at least enough to where the episode will do alright. I know there's been talk for new Felix the Cat comics coming out sometime this year, which will definitely help in making it a bit more relevant. Plus, we saw last year with the release of Pac-Man World Re-Pac and Pac-Man Museum Plus that there are still plenty of people clamoring for more Pac-Man content. I mean, who doesn't recognize that pizza missing a slice? Plus, I think just the mainstream popularity of Smash Bros. Alone will allow this episode to still get plenty of views. I think an analysis with Pac-Man and Felix could be very interesting. Not only could you talk about their personalities and abilities, but just go over the overall history of the characters and how they help their respective genres grow. It could be a nice little love letter to video games and cartoons, which would be really fun. I also think the fight could be great too. I like the idea of Felix's Toon Force abilities bouncing off with Pac-Man's arsenal of power-ups and weapons. Both can clone themselves, have access to various vehicles, and both even have superhero forms that they can turn into. I'd like to see Pac-Man turn into his Planet Pac form, only for Felix to grow his hand and slap Pac-Man in the face and cause him to spin. Maybe eventually Felix sucks Pac-Man into his magic bag, and both start fighting inside the magic bag dimension, which has access to a lot of weird creatures and visuals that I think the animators can get really creative with. In fact, I just think they'd be really creative in animating Felix just in general. We've seen before with Popeye and SpongeBob that they can do a great job animating with Toon Force characters. You can have a lot of fun animating his rubber hose style with a lot of squash and stretch, and have him do things like weaponizing his own exclamation points, or even just interacting and changing things about the animation itself. On Pac-Man's side of things, I would definitely love to see all the different berries he gets from Ghostly Adventures, as well as just other power-ups and abilities he has from his other games, like his lasers, tornadoes, electricity powers, this weird slowdown timing he has, as well as other things. Basically, I would like for them to stray away from just Pac-Man using his smash moveset like most animations do. Maybe you can have him bust out his mech suit he gains from Street Fighter X Tekken to fight Felix in his magic bag as it morphs into various animals or vehicles for Felix to ride on. And then at the end of the battle, Pac-Man can bust out the golden fruit to transform into his golden form for one final showdown with Felix. Oh, and I know I literally just said that I'd like for them to go away from Pac-Man's smash moves, but I would want Pac-Man's fully charged key neutral to be somewhere in there for personal reasons. And if Boomstick ever calls it the key to his victory at all in the analysis, then this would be a free 10 out of 10 episode. In terms of who I think wins the match, while I'm definitely rooting for Pac-Man to win here, I definitely have to place my bets on Felix winning here. I'm pretty sure the highest I've heard for Pac-Man is around star level, thanks to Ghostly Adventures, but Felix just has way more cosmic feats that are just way better, one of which reaches solar system level from surviving Mars sneezing, so Felix definitely holds the physical advantage. Now I don't think it's a stomp, as I do think Pac-Man has ways to win here. He's definitely the more skilled fighter and does have a more combat-centric arsenal, and some of his weapons could be game-ending for Felix. For example, there are versions of the power pellet that allow Pac-Man to eat non-ghostly enemies, so he could potentially use that to just eat Felix. He could also turn Felix into presents, and his magic pen, which can seal away ink creatures, would be the perfect weapon against Felix, who is canonically a living cartoon character being drawn and made of ink. But I would probably still end up siding with Felix despite this. Again, not only does he just physically outclass Pac-Man, but he also has his own insta-win options too. He can pull off Pac-Man's outlines to just turn him into a puddle, tear him off the page and whip him into pieces, or just grab the animator's eraser and erase him completely. Definitely helps that I believe that Felix is just much faster than Pac-Man, given we see him piloting a ship to the Milky Way galaxy in a couple of seconds, which I think is faster than anything I've seen for Pac-Man. I never actually hear good speed feats for him. So if anyone's gonna pull out the finishing blow first, I think it'd be Felix, which is why I think this is the Whitey-O conclusion. So yeah, like I said, I think this match could be really fun, even if I don't think it'll happen. But who knows? A lot of people have actually started wising up and supporting this match lately. Maybe a little late to start fighting for it, but hey, any support is welcome. Perhaps if we keep fighting the good fight, maybe we can make it happen one day. A man can certainly dream. Wiley the Coyote from the Looney Tunes versus Tom from Tom and Jerry. In a game of cat and mouse, or Coyote and Roadrunner in Wiley's case, these are the two most iconic animal predators trying to catch their prey in the Warner Bros. But no matter how hard they try to catch their rivals, they always get made into slapstick fools through a combination of bad luck and their own incompetence. I would be so happy if this was announced as a death battle. Both Tom and Jerry and the Looney Tunes are cartoons that I grew up watching a lot of, so both of these series are very special to me. Now I know some people might be wondering why this isn't Tom vs Sylvester, which technically makes more sense connection wise since they're both cats. Well, I just think Wiley brings a lot more to the table in terms of fight potential, thanks to all the various weapons and gadgets he orders from Acme. Plus I'm pretty sure more people care more about Wiley than Sylvester if I were to make a guess. I'd imagine the fight would either have to be hand-drawn or sprites. Sure, both have 3D models, but they don't really look all that great. The only time I've ever seen these two work in 3D is with movies and shorts with insanely high budgets, so probably best to keep this 2D. I'd imagine both would have very different game plans in this fight. Tom would definitely be more aggressive, actively trying to chase Wiley down with a hammer or something to try and attack, while Wiley would try to put some distance between him and Tom in order to try and set up traps for Tom to run into. Maybe Wiley can paint a realistic looking tunnel on the side of a mountain and Tom actually runs into it, and Wiley ends up surprised that it actually worked for once. You can have Wiley pull out his Acme lightning bolts or use his Acme weather control kit to try and shock Tom, but Tom ends up absorbing the electricity and ends up firing it back at him. He could potentially turn this into a vehicle battle, with Tom using his car from the Fast and Furry movie, and Wiley using one of his various vehicles to try and keep up. Or you can have both don the winged costumes and start taking flight into the skies, until something unlucky happens to them, like them getting struck by lightning and end up with their wings getting burned off, and they both just end up falling. Wiley is definitely an expert when it comes to falling, that's for sure.
Pardon me, Mr. Coyote. I didn't mean to impede the course of progress.
Honestly, I would just love that for the entire match, both are just constantly taking L's like that. I want all the cartoony slapstick. I want to see them get crushed, burned, blown up, beaten up, and all other types of cartoon violence. It'd be funny if they ended up hurting themselves more than each other, as they keep trying to set up traps for one another, only for it to blow up in their faces, until eventually one of those traps actually works and that acts as the finishing blow. Definitely would compare this fight to the likes of Hercule vs. Dan in that regard, only this fight would be way more cartoony and destructive. Oh, and who could possibly forget the banter potential? I mean, both are pretty much iconic for their voices.
I'm Tom.
I'm Jerry.
You talked!
Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Coyote. Wiley Coyote. I am a genius by trade.
You could have Wiley mock poor Tom, explaining how he shouldn't try and run away because of how much better he is than Tom. And Tom would just be at a loss of words because of how angry Wiley makes him. And come on now, don't be shy. Go ahead and turn this fight into a musical.
Take it home! The greatest gift in life's a friend!
In all seriousness, it's probably best for both to stay silent during this, with Wiley only communicating with his signs and the only thing coming out of Tom's mouth being his iconic screams. In terms of picking out a winner for this, without scaling, I think both are pretty comparable in a sense that both are just super hard to kill. Both survived being turned into constellations before, so I think both are even in terms of power. But at the end of the day, I would probably side with Tom winning this. Tom is just generally shown to be way more competent than Wiley has. I mean, it literally was a written rule that the Roadrunner was not allowed to harm or fight against Wiley. So literally every time Wiley fails, it's purely because of him being stupid or just having bad luck. While this rule isn't as enforced nowadays, he's still seen being defeated by bad luck more often than not. Sure, Tom has also lost before because of bad luck, but the majority of the time it's because Joey actually fights back against Tom and ends up outsmarting him. And even then, Tom is still seen actually getting the upper hand on Joey many times before, and has actually won many times before. Unlike Wiley, where I can only think of one time where he manages to get the upper hand on the Roadrunner, and it was during basketball practice of all things. Yes, Wiley has bragged about being a super genius, being able to build his own machines to try and catch his prey, but honestly, Tom isn't too far off given we've seen him be able to create his own contraptions as well, like his own car, a computer, and even a whole rocket ship by himself. Speaking of machines, Tom's arsenal just has a much better track record than Wiley's Acme tools, which are pretty well known to backfire and cause him to fall off cliffs, unlike most of Tom's weapons, which typically require Jerry's interference in order to take him out. Plus, while both are very difficult to kill, I'd argue that Tom is more difficult to kill, because Tom canonically has 9 lives. This means that Wiley would have to try to kill Tom 9 times, and given how even these two are in terms of stats, I don't see him being able to do that before Tom manages to kill him just once. Now, I don't think it's a stomp, as I do think Wiley is faster than Tom, given we see that some of Wiley's gear can actually somewhat keep up with the Roadrunner, and we have seen Tom struggle a lot with faster opponents before. But what self-respecting Tom and Jerry fan would I be if I didn't bring up what could possibly be Tom's most iconic tool to date? The velocity enhancing speed altering ultra zapper. Oh, I know all the Tom and Jerry fans have been waiting for me to bring this bad boy up. With this zapper, all Tom has to do is zap Wiley once and he could slow Wiley down to a snail's pace. This is looking like a pretty easy Tom dub, methinks. The main thing that could make or break this debate is whether or not you could scale Wiley to the higher ups of the Looney Tunes verse, like Bugs or Daffy, who I've heard have potential arguments for universal level stuff, which I haven't seen or heard anything like that for Tom and Jerry. There have been cartoons with Bugs going up against Wiley before, but I don't think Wiley does anything in those cartoons to justify scaling to Bugs, given that Bugs mostly wins through outsmarting Wiley as opposed to actually fighting him. And Wiley mostly only used his machines to try and catch bugs, and always ends up failing anyways. So for now, I would probably still side with Tom for this one. He's got this in the bag.
In me power.
Monokuma from Danganronpa versus Koro-sensei from Assassination Classroom. These two are the forever smiling non-human heads of classrooms where one of the main ways to pass is to kill, with the students either having to kill each other in the killing game or having to find a way to kill Koro-sensei in the Assassination Classroom. I think this match would be very interesting in the sense that both have a lot of similarities but completely opposite mindsets, with Koro-sensei actually being a good-hearted teacher who's trying to help students who are deemed hopeless and trying to better them as people, and Monokuma actively trying to kill off students that are filled with potential and represent the hope of the world in order to cause despair. So if these two were to ever actually meet, I know for certain that they would absolutely hate each other. I'd imagine the fight would start because Monokuma is trying to start up another killing game with Koro's students, and Koro finds out about this and tries to stop Monokuma before it's too late. I definitely hope to see this match happen one day. Definitely the biggest draw of this fight for me is the opportunity to see Danganronpa on the show. What started as just a random let's play I stumbled upon to, eventually became one of my favorite game series ever, and I think Monokuma would be the perfect first choice of a character to represent the series with, given he's the face of Danganronpa and has the most stuff to work with. And I think Koro-sensei is the perfect match for him. Definitely prefer it over the likes of Junko vs Springtrap. Don't get me wrong, I would actually be interested to see FNAF discussed on the show. I mean, I literally want Fall Guys vs Among Us, so I don't think I'm in any position to say what should or shouldn't be on the show. But I just don't think this would be the way they should go about it. I feel like most of the connections for these two are a bit of a stretch, and while I definitely don't deny there are probably some cool things you could do with the fight, I just believe Koro-sensei and Monokuma have way more potential for a fun matchup. Oh, it's okay, Larry. They could just have Monokuma fight Koro-sensei and have Junko fight Spring. That's not how it works. Because, spoiler alert, Junko and Monokuma are literally the same person. Junko is the one that controls Monokuma in the background for the majority of the series. It wouldn't make sense to have two separate episodes for them. No matter who you ultimately focus on, both are still going to be talked about in the analysis. If you focus on Junko, the majority of the analysis would still bring up Monokuma being the main tool that she uses, and if you focus on Monokuma, you'll still have to bring up Junko's backstory and how Monokuma came to be. It would literally be the same analysis either way. I unfortunately don't see Danganronpa being a series that they would have many episodes for, let alone returning characters for, so I'd rather use the one chance to have Monokuma be used on the show be against Koro-sensei. Just give Springtrap to Freddy Krueger or Chucky or something. I'm sure absolutely no one would be upset about that.
Hey!
I just think this fight could be so much fun. Since both Monokuma and Koro-sensei are known for using a lot of props and visual gags, I think the animation team could have a lot of fun animating these two. This is our chance to get Goku vs Sensei, guys, come on. I'd like to see Koro-sensei start off the fight by blitzing Monokuma and creating some after images to try and overwhelm Monokuma, till Monokuma ends up catching Koro-sensei off guard by creating his own after images, since he's shown to be able to do that too. And the two can eventually start clashing against each other at high speeds. I'm hoping that they somewhat recreate that one scene from Danganronpa If, with Mugo and the Monokuma robots, and have Koro-sensei and Monokuma fighting each other while they simultaneously dodge gunfire from the various torrent guns found across the academy. It would be a great way to portray both of their speed. Eventually though, Koro-sensei gains the advantage against Monokuma, and Monokuma brings out his various doubles to try and outnumber Koro-sensei. I would like to see all the various Monokuma variants from Ultra Despair Girls make an appearance, like the Bomber Monokuma, the Junk Monokuma, Beast Monokuma, and of course my boy Ball Monokuma. The episode wouldn't be complete without him. And in response, Koro-sensei could start to amp up his speed to create more after images to try and somewhat match Monokuma in numbers. There could be a scene where we see Koro completely dismantle a couple of Monokumas before they can even react to it. Perhaps you can have a scene where Monokuma tries to use the Despair video to brainwash Koro-sensei, but Koro-sensei manages to resist his effects thanks to him having hope for his students, kind of like how Chisa managed to before Mugo stepped in. I think Spites would be the best way to go about this match. Sure, both have 3D models for them to use thanks to J-Stars and Ultra Despair Girls, but I feel like Death Battle generally has a much better track record with more faster paced fights than 2D, which would definitely fit this fight the best. Now I know most people are probably rooting for Koro-sensei to win here because they want to root for the good guy here, but I'm definitely rooting for a Monokuma W. Not only because I'm biased towards Danganronpa, but I know if Monokuma wins, they'll likely have the fight end with an execution. I feel like they can get really creative with one of these, maybe having Koro think that he saved his students, only for him to have any hope for victory taken away from him at the last minute. I hope they can somehow recreate the style of the games doing this, with a nice altered version of the punishment time music. What better way to inflict despair on all the Assassination Classroom fans? Luckily for me, I actually do think Monokuma wins here. Danganronpa gets way more busted in terms of how many crazy feats there are than you would expect from a murder mystery game of all things.
Despair has taken everything from me. No one else will suffer.
Danganronpa can get up to town level thanks to Big Bang Monokuma scaling, as well as some other stuff, which I think Monokuma should scale to, given that he was able to fight and even greatly wound Sakura, who is stated many times to be one of the strongest in the series. This is way better than anything we've seen from Koro Sensei. Now I do think Koro Sensei is faster than Monokuma, but the speed gap isn't too wide. There are plenty of relativistic feats in DR that Monokuma can scale to, like people dodging shots from the hacking gun, or Mukuro moving so fast that bullets and explosions are basically frozen in her perspective. Now again, I think Koro Sensei still holds the speed advantage, given that he once dodged a light speed laser before, but I feel like as the fight progresses, Koro is going to start getting tired and slowing down, unlike Monokuma, who isn't going to get tired given that he's a robot. And this isn't taking into account that Koro is going to be fighting an army of these Monokumas. We know that there are over 30 Monokumas in the academy as seen in Danganronpa If, and there's even a chance that these 30 were part of a much larger contingent. And that's not even counting on the various Monokuma drones we see in Ultimate Despair Girls. I feel like even someone like Koro Sensei would start to get overwhelmed by these numbers. Adding into the fact that Junko is probably watching this go down, I can see her using her analytical talent to start getting a read on all Koro's patterns and start predicting his next move, to the point where eventually Monokuma will be able to land a clean hit to Koro's heart, which would ultimately kill him. Now one could argue that eventually Koro could figure out that Junko's controlling the Monokumas and figure out her location to finish her off to stop the Monokumas, but unfortunately that wouldn't work given that there was a Junko AI inside the Monokumas that allowed them to move even without someone controlling them. And we've seen in Ultra Despair Girls that the AI can control numerous Monokumas at once, so Koro will still be faced with the issue of getting outnumbered and eventually overwhelmed by the Monokumas. What a hopelessly fitting fate for Koro. I'm hoping that this fight happens really soon. I've seen a lot of people start to theorize that the black and white circle in the Death Battle Cypher Wheel is meant to hint towards Monokuma vs Koro Sensei happening this season, so I'm definitely high on copium that it'll happen this season. I guess you could say that my hope is really peaking for it to happen this season. Get it? Hopes peak? Hopes Peak Academy? Hopes Peak?
Now you see just how serious I am. Defy me and you get shot full of holes, exploded, buried alive, disintegrated, etc.
Sackboy from Little Big Planet versus Maxwell from Scribblenut. These two young and happy creative minds have shown the ability to create and summon anything their hearts desires, both coming from arts and crafts styled sandbox games that allow the player to let their imagination run wild, and both use that power for the greater good. This is without a doubt my most wanted death battle, to the point where the gap between this one and number 2 is huge. I'd gladly give up any other match on this list for this to happen one day. Not even gonna lie, the biggest reason why I want this match is just a chance to hear them talk about Little Big Planet. It's my #1 favorite game series ever, to the point where I pretty much played every game in the series, even the stupid Sackboy mobile game. But of course, not to disrespect Scribblenut or anything, I played a bit of it and it's a really fun and great game. It was very fun to come up with out-of-the-box solutions for all the various problems in the game. So yeah, I would definitely be down to see them talk about Maxwell. Sure, there are plenty of other matches for Sackboy like Steve, Kirby, or Paper Mario, and to be honest, with how desperate I am to see Sackboy on the show, I'd gladly take any of these if I had to. But if I had the choice, I just think Maxwell is the one you could do the most with. Another reason why I have this as my #1 out of this list, because I believe this has just overall the most potential for a creative and fun animation. Since both have shown to have the ability to summon just about anything they want, there's no limit in what you could put into this fight. I mean, it's only fitting that the matchup with the main connection of creativity and imagination would have the fight script where the limit of what you could do with it is your imagination. I'd imagine the fight would start off small, with both of them having a slap fight, until Maxwell starts using his notebook to summon weapons like swords or guns to try and fight Sackboy. So in response, Sackboy starts using his power-ups like his Grabinator to suplex Maxwell, or his Creatinator to fire off missiles, bombs, or just cupcakes at Maxwell. Eventually though, the battle escalates as they start to summon more and more crap out of nowhere, to the point where it's essentially an army battle with all those summons, with Sackboy summoning up various enemies and Sackbots to fight for him, and Maxwell just summons various animals and soldiers to go against Sackboy. There's a lot of fun interactions you can have between these two. I'd love to see Sackboy bust out one of his robot animal machines we see in Little Big Planet 2, like the Robo Bunny, the Bee 2.0, or the Hamstertron 3000, and in response, Maxwell could summon that mech suit he uses in that zombie level to fight back against them. Maybe Maxwell summons up a hood of bulls to try and run Sackboy over, and you can have Sackboy scroll through his various saved costumes and put on a bullfighter outfit and start maneuvering around the bulls. You can have a scene where Sackboy uses his creative mode to flood the area they're fighting in, so Maxwell summons up a submarine as well as various sea creatures to start fighting Sackboy. You can frame it like one of those whale or shark survival levels that were pretty popular in the LBP community, though that one might be a bit too specific for them to reference. Perhaps Maxwell can start using various negative adjectives on Sackboy to try and slow him down, so in an act of desperation, Sackboy just gets angry and self-destructs, which seemingly kills him only for him to spawn back in with a checkpoint, which he uses to catch Maxwell off guard. Oh, and of course, I want both of them to just summon a bunch of bombs and dynamite to make things even more destructive. And that's just scratching the surface for what you can do with this fight. I'm sure by the end of this fight, the entire arena would be littered with just random objects, like some sort of giant toy box. I can definitely see the animators and the team having a blast brainstorming what they can include in this fight, and I'd be excited to see what they come up with. In terms of how the fight should be animated, I think Sprite is the best course of action here. While 3D would obviously work for Sackboy, I just don't see Maxwell working well enough for it, and while hand-drawn would be nice and would fit the both of them, I think this would be a Steven vs Star case, where less is more, and it being Sprite would allow them to add more scenes to the fight, unlike with hand-drawn fights which are typically shorter. Now, a big argument I heard against this match is just that people see this as a big stomp in Maxwell's favor, but I don't think that's the case. I can generally see this fight going either way. Starting off with the two words that can ruin any good matchup, DC scaling. Thanks to the Scribblenauts Unmasked games and comics, there are arguments that Maxwell can scale to DC heralds, especially since he could just straight up summon DC characters with his notebook, but I personally don't agree with this. There's nothing stating that the DC characters from Scribblenauts are the same one from the actual comics. Sure, they make references to the comics, but so does every other DC series. Plus, it was literally stated by Josh Elder, the writer of Imagination and Crisis, that the Scribblenaut DC and canon DC are not the same. So this means it is not really viable to scale characters from Unmasked to their canon counterparts. There's also two big multiversal level feats that people like to bring up for Maxwell. One is when he and his sister survived the entire DC multiverse getting erased, and the other was when he used his notebook to bring everything back. Maxwell was only able to survive everything being erased because he wasn't part of the DC multiverse, and thus was unaffected by the wave that destroyed everything. As for bringing everything back, that was only possible because Maxwell converted the energy emitted from the Monitor and Anti-Monitor's fight into starlights, in order to power his notebook enough to be able to bring everything back. Without an outside power source like that, Maxwell can't do this naturally. Now, Maxwell may not be multiversal in his base form, but he does have access to his Hope and Determination suit, which basically allowed him to go toe to toe with the Anti-Monitor, who absorbed the multiverse being converted into energy. So that still means he stomps the planet level Sackboy, right? Well, no. There are actually arguments that Sackboy can match this level of power. We see Sackboy be able to stop various cosmic threats like the Negativitron or Vex, who both threaten the entire Imagisphere. And the cosmology of the Imagisphere has been described as an omniverse that is made up from the creative thoughts of every single living creature in the entire omniverse, from atomic to galactic. This would make Sackboy a multiversal level threat, given again he's able to defeat people like Vex, who is able to turn the entire Imagisphere into a nightmarish omniverse. So this actually puts Sackboy on the same level of power as Maxwell. Not to mention the fact that if Sackboy dies, he'll just be sent back to the Imagisphere and be able to come back. So actually permanently putting down Sackboy would be really difficult, even for someone who has what is essentially just a death note in their hands. Especially since Sackboy can just summon up checkpoints for himself in his puppet. So yeah, this battle definitely has way more factors than you initially think at a first glance. and that definitely helps in making this fight a lot more appealing to me, so it'll definitely be interesting to see Death Battle try to figure this one out. If you want to learn more about the feats and abilities for both, I highly recommend this prediction blog made by Nano's Death Battles. It's what opened my eyes to all these things I didn't know about, and was interesting to go through. As for who I think wins, I have next to no idea. My bias in Copium is telling me that Sackboy could pull this off, since Sackboy is just physically superior to base Maxwell. Maybe if Sackboy is fast enough, he could end the fight before Maxwell can cause too much damage with his notebook, since it does actually take time for him to write down what he wants. Probably helps that Sackboy can just straight up freeze time to increase his chances of finishing off Maxwell, but again, this could just be me being biased. I can definitely see this one going either way, and I'm praying that this will eventually happen as a death battle.
Craftworld needs a new protector. A sack person of true potential. Someone like you.
And I think that covers just about everything. Definitely a lot of unique characters in this lineup, I'm sure. But I guess I'm just a real sucker for more out-of-the-box matches like these. I just like having characters in matches that you wouldn't normally take seriously be covered on the show. Plus I just really like matches that have a lot of animation potential, with my number one being the biggest example. Thank you so much to the Death Battle crew for all the years of great fights you've given us, and even if none of these fights happen, I'm still looking forward to seeing what you bring to the future. And as for everyone else watching, I hope you all enjoyed this video. I know this is much different from my usual content, and I do apologize for the lack of animation uploads lately. I guess work can just be a real motivation drainer nowadays, but I'll try my best to get back to the swing of things. Definitely have a few things I'm excited to show off, but until then, I hope you all have a wonderful day.